Ready?
Ready.
I'm Laura Daniel, and welcome to Laura Loves New York. I have an incredibly special guest for Mother's Day, my fabulous friend, Wendy Ruth, whom I have known since my freshman year at college. She is a professional storyteller.
Wendy has visited me many times in New York City. She took her family to the Stonewall Monument, and she took me to Hamilton.
Please welcome writer, director, stage manager, actor, storyteller, Wendy Ruth. Woo!
Thank you. What an introduction.
Wendy's new book, The 50 Things to Know About Motherhood, Stories and Truths from a Parent of Twins, is now available on Amazon.
You can find it on bookshop.org and help a local bookshop, and it's available on Audible with me narrating.
But I just got to listen to it, and it's two plus hours of just so many amazing stories and so easy to listen to. And you list all these wonderful subjects of the 50 things to know about motherhood. But what does motherhood mean to you?
That was such an interesting exploration through this book, that children came into our lives so much later because my wife and I had to rely on science to have children. And it was not easy for us to have an accident that way. It gave us a lot of time to prepare and to really think about the kind of moms we wanted to be. We are married as two women, so our lives are different. But there was so much about motherhood that I found daunting or scary that I wanted to take that into account in this book. That it's not what to expect when you're expecting, a book I never read, by the way. That, my mom was 30 when she started having kids for a variety of reasons. And so it wasn't strange to me. I didn't feel a pressure when I was in my 20s that I needed to get married or have children. I was much more focused on my career and changing the world, through the power of words and strangeness, that it was okay with me that we were starting this family so much later in our lives. My wife is 6 years younger than I am. And so we're definitely parents that are older than many people of our kids' friends. I was 35 when I had twins, which made me high risk, by the way.
Isn't that crazy?
But my mom was only 22 when she had her first child, who happened to be a 16-year-old girl. She took in my dad's youngest siblings and raised them through high school and college and marriage. So by the time we came along, my sisters and I, my parents were used. Like, my aunt had tried everything. So my mom had worked with second and third graders as a teacher. She loved babies. So she had certain ideas of how kids should be raised. And that is what she did for us. So my sister lives with us. And I had a compatriot in that. My sister and I were like, well, this is what you do.
And Wendy gives credit to Cindy for helping them raise the twins when they were little.
But to the point of being inclusive, I know that not everybody was raised by my mother, even though she would have been happy to raise everyone.
I know I was very fortunate to meet your mom, and you mentioned in the book how she took everybody in the neighborhood and anybody who visited. She instantly was, she was like a little mama bear, Yeah.
There are people to this day who can quote her advice or something that she said to them, that people sought her out for that. So there's a lot of Barbara Ruth infused in the book, for sure. But my parents were also very inclusive in that way. Like, I remember their gay friends, the people that my dad hired to work with. So we recognized that there were all kinds of families. We recognized that there were all kinds of parents. And while mine, they didn't stress about being ideal parents, they just were. They were present, I think, was a big part of it. They were present. And that's something that we continue, my wife and I, just to be present for kids, to be understanding that not everybody's household is the same.
I love that you also include, because you include parents who adopt, you include non-traditional, as you say, the LGBTQ families. I know so many great parents who are, there's two dads. And you also, something I thought was very cool and inclusive is talking about the fur families we have. You know, a lot of people have their fur babies, and how do you acclimate a fur baby with a human child? Something you say in so many of these pieces is how communication is so essential. But as they start to really verbalize their world, asking them questions. Can you talk a little more about that?
Yeah. Actually, you are such a great inspiration for questions. It's always been Laura Daniel and her questions, who isn't afraid to dig in there, to go there. But I so admire that about you, and I always have, that you will ask anything. So I'm thankful for this forum for you to be able to explore that. But just way back, even in our college dorm room, like, you let nothing lie. Your ability to ask questions and let people explore their own thoughts is super inspirational. And as a parent, I borrow that, right? It's too easy when a kid is rambling about the plot of the anime that they're watching that you haven't seen. It's too easy to just go, and phase out. But if there's a piece that you can glom onto and say, well, why did that happen? Or what do you like about that? To get to know that child's mindset. It's very hard to do with teenagers. It's very hard to do with those middle schoolers, but finding ways to ask questions about the stories that they're telling you when they're little helps when you get into the middle school and on into the high school age, to let them explore their own thoughts about it in Laura Daniel style. Let people dig into what they're really thinking. If you just assume that you know it all, you're not going to be right all the time. And so it's important to me, I feel very lucky that I had that sort of nurturing, that sort of parents who listened and asked questions. You can ask a baby who's babbling, oh, really? Tell me more. Which we did. And now sometimes we regret it, because when the children keep talking, you're like, But I'm thankful to have teenagers that talk to us.
Yes.
But I so enjoyed that when they just babbled, acting like you were having a full conversation with them, or reading a book or going to a museum and asking the questions. What do you see? Do you like this? And what could you do with that? It helps them to think about it. When you're present for them in their elementary school years, in their middle school years, it changes form. Sometimes you're just the one who's waiting for them to come to you. And other times, especially when you can be the fairy godmother, that the parents are driving them crazy, so they need somebody else to go to. And if you have that same kind of trust built, you're still present for them in a great way.
Well, that's something that you mentioned in your book, which I think is fantastic, is community, is making sure that you have support. You talked about that in going from your pregnancy and like doing yoga, and it's like, oh my God. I mean, there were just, again, it was such a luscious ride. And I remember meeting your twins. I think it might have been, I don't know if they were just a few weeks old, but
They were in the stroller probably, right?
They were just teeny, and just how, again, I feel like every parent, you guys really need a celebration, because like you said, it's their birthday, you gave birth to them. So yeah, you should be celebrated too.
Heck yeah.
That was the thing. I love how your chapters start with little quotes from fabulously famous people.
And some amazing mommy bloggers, and from novels. When I was writing the book, I thought, who am I to tell this story? Yes, it's called Stories and Truths from a Parent of Twins. So I very specifically said, this is my story, but I reference a lot of experts. I reference a lot of other writers and other people I know, other parents, because I'm not alone, first of all. We do this as a group, but I wanted to share this perspective, thinking that other people might have it, and pull in from those other resources, because I have been influenced by so many. Mm-hmm. And I'm hoping that if young parents or new parents read the book, that they find solace in it, like, okay, I'm not alone, I can do this.
Yes.
But also for parents who are more established, or folks like yourself who have connection to kids, that there's enough in it that you think about who you truly are and what it means to be a mother.
That in and of itself of, you're not alone. I think that was the biggest thing, especially with COVID, as it happened last year and how things changed so drastically. And thinking of some parents out there who might feel that way, especially parents of twins where you're like, oh my God,
right, or single parents, right? You have to have a network.
Yeah. And just knowing, so you have some really great suggestions for creating, connecting, finding your network, which I thought, again, so important. And when people offer, I remember you saying this when your babies were little, when people offer to help, take it.
Yeah. I know too many hero parents. I know too many who work full time, who, especially this happens to single parents because you don't have a lot of choice in the matter. And if your family doesn't live close and you don't have resources, how do you get by, right? How do you make those decisions? And I reflect a lot of that in the book, because it's not my experience, thank goodness, but the woman who is now my kid's grandma was a single mom. She was my mom's co-leader for Girl Scouts way back when my sister was 7 years old. But she was a single parent and attached to our family because my parents took her in as well, and her 3 children, and all of us grew up together. We did so many things together. The single parents that I know now who work full time, commute here in California, or folks in New York who have to pile their kids onto the train. I think of all the gack you take when you have children, especially with twins.
It's
the amount of stuff.
Yeah.
And how to balance it all. You can see the influence, because I was writing it during the pandemic, because you can definitely see the influence of that sense of being alone, of finding a network, of how do you do it all, because we had time and so many people stayed home during that time, but we were going to get back to busy lives.
Yeah.
And how do you include children in your lives? How do you protect yourself? How do you take care of yourself and your partner, especially when you're all under the same roof, working and helping kids with school and dealing with your fur babies and the stress of everything? You'll definitely see the influence of that in the book.
Did you feel, because of COVID, that it gave you an opportunity for you guys to connect in a different way? Because you do talk about the mommy calendar, and that how suddenly it was like, oh, because we're not driving here, we're not driving there, Did it give you a chance to connect with your kids, or were they kind of more like, oh, I'm gonna go in my room? I don't know, because again, I know they're teenagers.
They're teenagers. They spend most of their time in their room anyway. But it was funny for us because I had insisted pre-pandemic that we eat at the dining room table, because that's, again, how I was raised. No screens, you sit down and talk to people. And I believe that helps you as you grow up to be able to talk to people in the real world. Now everybody looks at their phone. But what we found during the pandemic was that because we didn't have work, because the calendar was empty, my wife and I were both furloughed at first. So everybody had things to do to keep themselves busy. The kids had school in the morning, virtual school. So the dining table kind of phased out because we saw each other all day. We did try to watch movies together. We worked our way through like the Marvel canon so we could catch up to where WandaVision was.
Yeah.
And ironically, WandaVision is about an unconventional family with twins.
We had Jeopardy tournaments. We got together for pub trivia online, which was hysterical. And we were playing as a team.
Oh, wow.
It was really fun because we're nerds and we like trivia. Yeah, we'll see what happens when we all go back to work.
I love how you talk about, being kind of freaked out of what kind of mother should you be. You talk about perfection and also trying to honor yourself of like, well, who do I who do I want to be? And we've talked about this as women who are getting towards, the change, how who we thought we were is sort of evolving into something else. And so how do you relate to that? How do you go on that ride? And I love that you talk about forgiveness, and you talk about just, kind of trying to open the box a little bit more, so to speak. On your website, you have that you are a storyteller by habit and by trade.
That is correct.
Now, how long have you been doing this?
Well, I've been telling stories since I could speak. You could ask my mother if she were still with us. She used to tell stories about my stories and the strange things I did as a child, where I constantly had a different name, or sometimes I was a boy, or sometimes I was an animal. And she just took it in stride with me and my invisible friend, and was like, okay, great. So this is who you are today. And then she would tell those stories to her friends about this strange little kid that she had. I wrote a poem probably when I was 7 years old, and she typed it, she printed it, or, at the time, mimeographed it, and gave it out to all of her friends and said, my 7-year-old wrote this.
Wow.
Yeah. She watched me writing, and she championed that. Which I'm thankful for, because a lot of parents would go, that's nice, dear, and put it away.
I love that you tackle so many different issues, like what do you do with children's art, because there's so much of it. And so sort of almost like curating, in a way, but creating a box for them for when they're older. I think that's so cool.
Yeah, it's, I blatantly stole that idea from a ton of different parenting magazines. Especially when the kids were little, I subscribed to like Parents Magazine. Real Simple was another one of my favorites, because the advice was so simple, it's so clear. But I found when we were curating the kids' boxes that when my children got to be about middle school age, it was the best time to go through that art box, because you could say, do you want us to keep this? No? Okay. But then some of those, they're like, Mom, it's so embarrassing. I just put it away. I'm like, great, because it did show, their genius. Of course, it showed their genius. So I'd want to hold on to those pieces.
Well, and what a fun trip down memory lane as well.
Everything is a story to me. If it's something that happened to us, then I rework it into a routine, a story to tell. That's why I say I'm a storyteller by habit as well as by trade, because if I can remember the details enough and share it in a way that makes somebody laugh or helps us to remember what happened, that's the habit part, is those personal stories that help us to remember what happened when the kids were little, stories that keep my parents alive, things that happened to me and my sisters or to my cousins and ourselves, that those became stories. So last year, when I had all this time, because I was furloughed during quarantine time, I started writing them down.
I love that you play with your kids, that you encourage their creativity. You have a lot of great stories, and I don't want to give any of them away, but being careful of squashing creativity. Yeah.
Yes, I'm very vulnerable in the book. I share some heartbreaking moments.
It was very Irma Bombeck to me. I had a little bit of that flavor, like, hey, I felt like I was, in your life with you, getting these little tastes, and yet it's still very protective, how you reference your wife as Z, and I love your dedication to your wife at the end, that the book is dedicated to her. Just amazing.
She's a far better parent than I am. She's a far better mom and better mother figure than I am. It's surprising to people, since she presents as Butch, that they can't imagine that she's this amazing mom. She's the one who wanted 5 children. After
where you were like, oh.
she goes, she said, it's not fair. You did 2 at once. And I was like, right. And now it's your turn. and she was like, yeah, let's see how these 2 turn out.
that's one of the big things I love to ask my guests is if you had any advice you would give your younger self, what would it be?
I had participated in a lean-in circle through work a few years ago where we were asked to bring a picture of ourselves as a kid and think about what that kid wanted at that time, what you want now, and things like, what would you say to her? And we all broke down in this circle. It was an amazing group of women in this lean-in circle. And we all broke down into tears thinking about the children we had been and what we wanted then and what we were going through now. And during the pandemic, I had that chance to go, well, but I liked that stuff. I told the little girl in my picture, keep going, believe in yourself. Because of the weird child that I was, I now thankfully get paid to be weird and write stories. So I just needed to tell her, there will be people that want to stop you, but keep going, because it is unique and it's worth it. We suffer in the world from a lack of imagination. And even though this is, 50 tips for mothers, it is about your own imagination, about the imagination of children, about creativity in general. And as a kid, I lived there and I was encouraged to do so, that I would tell that little girl, keep going. I was very lucky that my parents encouraged me to get a theater degree, that my mom, who secretly had wanted to be a writer, was like, yes, keep going, keep doing it. So I encourage it when you see that spark in someone or find it in yourself, to nurture it. That spark was nurtured in me, and I'm thankful for it, because my parents had been such great fans of mine, because I learned to read with voices and inflection from my dad, who wanted to be in radio, that I feel their influence so much. They are present. And I do remember times where I was like, how do I say this? And an answer would come in and I go, thanks, Mom, and keep going. So I hope that she would be proud for the number of things that I absorbed of hers and repeated to the world. But she was essentially my first publisher, right? So to see my name in print, I think is important and would have been important to her. So
that's amazing. I'm so thankful for our friendship. I'm so glad that you could be on my show. Please, everyone, go check out 50 Things to Know About Motherhood.
And Wendy's other book, 50 Travel Tips from a Local, about Anaheim, California, is also available on Amazon and Audible.
Bookshop.org will have a local bookstore as well.
Super, super cool. Thank you so much, Wendy Ruth. We will definitely have you back because, again, I know you got a lot of fun tools in your toolbox that we haven't even, this is just one of them. But this book is great. Everybody go read it, listen to it, enjoy it, and have a happy Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day, Wen.
Happy Mother's Day. Thank you.
All right, and we will see you on the next Laura Loves New York.
'Cause Laura